Hello, and welcome to part one of the lecture on chapter 5, Microbial Metabolism. Like with some other material that we've covered this semester, some of this may be a refresher of material that you learned in biology or in your chemistry classes. So what do we mean by metabolism? I'm going to move something out of the way for myself. Let's see. We are talking about the chemical reactions that happen inside a cell. And because we're in a microbiology class, we're talking about specifically what's going on inside a microbe. Ultimately, in biology, the ultimate function of all of these chemical reactions is for the cell to be able to make a copy of that cell, to make another copy of itself. With microbes, we're talking about reproducing the entire organism because it's one cell big. And I know that this is a lot of text, but there are basically 8 steps or statements about metabolism. And we can get it all onto one slide. So we're going to walk through it slowly. These are basically the rules of metabolism, the rules of life. Every single cell, in order to be able to make another cell, it's going to have some supplies provided to it, or it's going to be able to collect some supplies. We refer to these supplies as nutrients. And then just having those supplies, you can't just like build a house or something. Like you got to put some energy into it. There's going to be some investment. And microbes can do this in a couple of ways, and all organisms in general. We require energy input. Some microbes and some larger organisms can get that energy in the form of light. These are the organisms that can photosynthesize. They can use photons coming in, and they use that to help put some molecules together. But the microbes that we're interested in, and we're interested in them because they live on us, they don't get their energy from light. They get their energy from getting nutrients from other organisms. The term catabolism, you may remember, to catabolize something is to break it down. So take a large energy-rich molecule, break it down, and release both the energy that's stored up as well as the individual components of that molecule. And those can be used as building blocks for the next molecules. Now, this energy, a lot of it that gets released during catabolism, a lot of it gets lost as heat, but some of it can get stored temporarily in a form of energy called ATP, adenosine triphosphate. We talked about this in the chemistry chapter. We get adenosine, and then if it has one phosphate group, it's adenosine monophosphate. It has 2 phosphate groups, it's adenosine diphosphate. And if it has 3 phosphate groups, it's adenosine triphosphate. And that ATP, adenosine triphosphate, that's the most energy-rich form of this molecule. And so we throw that 3rd phosphate group on there temporarily just to store a little energy. I think of it like a spring that you've kind of jammed together. And then once it releases that 3rd phosphate group, it's releasing the energy. All right, so part of this, catabolizing nutrients, breaking down the nutrients, part of it is releasing the energy so we can make this adenosine triphosphate. And part of it, like I mentioned, is releasing so-called precursor metabolites, which is a fancy way of saying bricks, building blocks. For example, if we're talking about breaking down proteins, the individual pieces of those proteins are the amino acids. So that's what I mean by metabolites. It's a piece that I'm going to use later to build something else. Okay, so then I've got my precursor metabolites, my bricks. I've got energy from ATP, and I'm going to use those 2 things to build something larger. And when I do that, or when the cell does that, the cells use something called enzymes that are used to put these pieces together and build up a larger macromolecule. When we build bigger molecules, and it takes energy, those reactions are anabolic reactions. They're building. You may know this term, anabolic steroids, is what sometimes athletes, bodybuilders use to help. So if that helps you to like think about building up. So anabolic reactions are building things up, making things bigger. Catabolic reactions are breaking things down. All right, so then we'll talk about what enzymes are, but in a nutshell, enzymes are catalysts. They're things that make reactions go better, faster, but they are not consumed by the reaction. I think I gave you the analogy earlier that this would be, for example, if you have a couple and they want to get married and you have a justice of the peace or you have some other government official who can officiate the wedding to make these two individuals a unit, make them a couple, a married couple, but then that officiant doesn't become part of the couple. They just help make the union and then they go away. And that's what enzymes do. And enzymes can be used to build, you know, build these larger molecules. So the enzymes plus energy from in the form of ATP we use this to build those macromolecules, the complex carbohydrates, the nucleic acids like DNA and RNA, proteins, lipids, and cells physically get bigger by building these macromolecules. And the rough rule of thumb for cell reproduction is the cells will get ready to make another cell once they've gotten about twice as big as they were originally. So those 8 statements pretty much tell you like these are all the things that are required. These are the steps we take when the cells are getting bigger and then ultimately getting ready to reproduce. All right, so now let's make sure that we got those terms defined. I know I said these things, but let's put it down in writing. The 2 major classes of metabolic reactions are those reactions that break things down or build things up. When we're breaking things down, we call those catabolic pathways. Pathways just means there's a series of reactions. It's not generally just one reaction. So it breaks these larger molecules like macromolecules, fuel molecules, carbs, proteins, lipids, into the smaller pieces. When we do that, when we take the larger molecules and break them down into smaller pieces, we generally are releasing energy. The exer going out, exit, energy is getting out from that molecule. It's being released. So catabolic reactions, breakdown reactions, tend to be exergonic. They tend to release energy. And I'll show you this in a diagram. The opposite, the anabolic pathways, those reactions that build up larger molecules, synthesize large molecules from the smaller products of catabolism. So remember, we ate some protein, or the microbe took in some protein, and then broke it down into the individual amino acids. That's catabolic. And then those individual amino acids, those are the precursor metabolites. Those are the things that I'm going to use now to build this larger molecule, to synthesize the larger protein from those smaller amino acids. That doesn't happen for free. If you're going to put a bunch of amino acids together to build a larger molecule, that's going to cost something. So these reactions that require energy input, they take in energy, ender, so into the reaction, they're going to take some energy. All right, so here are some diagrams that I took from a freshman level biology text. On the x-axis, we have progress of the reaction, think time. And on the y-axis represented the potential energy of the molecule. So potential energy, remember that means stored up energy. First, we'll look at exergonic reactions. These are reactions that release energy. The notation for this, delta is change, G is free energy. So it's change in free energy. We're going to go from, we're basically releasing energy. So this is less than zero. So we're going to, how to put it, the molecules themselves are going to lose energy. So start here. The beginning molecules, we'll call those the reactants. Those are the molecules that are going to participate in this reaction. In this case, let's think about proteins. They have some pretty high stored up energy, or lipids, or complex carbohydrates. We've got stored up energy. And then if we break those down into the individual subunits, the products of the reaction, so start with protein, break them down into individual amino acids. These amino acids have lower energy. So think of it as a downhill reaction. If you can picture yourself at the top of a slide when you were a kid, you go down the slide, that releases your potential energy. So this is moving down. So, and there's going to be energy output. The opposite happens when you take these amino acids. So maybe you ate some meat and broke down to the individual amino acids, then these are in the bloodstream, and you're going to use those amino acids to build the proteins that you want to build. The reaction appears to go the other way. So we start out with the reactants, low energy, the individual amino acids, put them together in the order we want, or the microbe consumes the protein, breaks it down into individual amino acids, and then builds up the amino acids into the proteins that it wants. That is going to require an investment of energy, this energy input. And that's what we use the ATP for. I'm going to use this to pay for this reaction. So those, again, endergonic reactions take in energy and end up with a larger molecule. This is representing anabolic reactions. And all of metabolism is basically alternating. You do this reaction, break it down. It's like taking the nutrients, break them down, release some energy, store it temporarily as ATP, and then take those individual subunits, rebuild them, put them back together in the order that you want, you or the microbe wants. Use ATP that you made up over here, use that ATP to pay for this reaction. So it's downhill and then uphill. More analogies: if you're driving a truck, you go down the hill, you like let yourself build up some momentum, and that helps to carry you at least part of the way up the next hill. Okay, so this is the diagram from our text representing precisely what I just told you. Here's a single-celled organism. Nutrients come in, carbs, proteins, lipids, whatever. We're going to break those molecules down, release some of the energy, and then we'll try to capture that as ATP. We had ADP, adenosine diphosphate, and we used the energy that was being released by this catabolic reaction to put a third phosphate group on there. Okay, then we use that stored up energy of ATP, this precursor molecule. So now we started, let's say, with a protein, broke it down into the individual amino acids. Now we're going to make the order of amino acids we want for the protein we want to build, and pay for the building using ATP. And that's anabolism. We build the larger building blocks. This could be proteins, lipids, nucleic acids, carbohydrates. And those are make the different structures, cell structures, like phospholipids for the phospholipid bilayer, proteins for the spindles that have to form or doing mitosis, nucleic acids making copies of the DNA. You understand. Okay, and some of it can be just stored as longer term storage of energy. ATP stores energy briefly. But if we need a more stable thing for some hours or days, we're going to want something more stable like complex carbohydrates or lipids. And then the cycle continues. Maybe we stored some energy in the form of lipids, but we want that energy back now because it's time to go do something. So we break down those lipids, release those pieces, and release some energy and store it temporarily as ATP to pay for the next reaction. And that's how we cycle through a series of metabolic processes. All right, that will be the end of part 1. See you over in part 2.